Hello, this is Jeff Cook from Air Base Arizona of the Commemorative Air Force. We're talking today to Harold Wanamaker, a World War II veteran and former prisoner of war. Harold, thank you for coming to talk to us today and telling us some of your adventures while you were in the service during World War II. Harold, I'd like to start with just your trip overseas, and I understand from what you told me before that that was an adventure unto itself, and your arrival into Italy.
Well, as it was, I had graduated from OCS and so forth, and then we were assigned an airplane to Topeka, Kansas, and flew the route. I don't know what they call it, the southern route or not, but we went down through Trinidad and at Belém, Brazil, we flew over to Dakar in Africa, and had our 50-hour mission, 50-hour inspection at Marrakesh in Morocco. And then a couple days later, we flew up to Tunis, and then over to Sicily, and then up to our base in Stanora. We landed there in April of 1944, and we started our missions in May.
Harold, you were in a B-24. You had a really responsible job as the bombardier. Could you take a little bit of time to talk about one of those missions that stands out in your mind that brings back some memories?
I had about 4 missions in, and then we were badly shot up on it was a Focke-Wulf engine plant north of Munich.
Right.
And unfortunately, this was on the 13th of June, and we lost 6 of our crew on that mission. 4 guys failed to bail out of the airplane, and 2 that bailed out. One, I don't know really what happened to him. I believe he may have been hit by the airplane as it headed back north just before it hit, seemed like.
Right.
Of course, the first mission that I can say that I felt like I could be scared. Yeah. All the rest of them didn't seem to have any fear on flying over the target, even though you saw the flak and everything. But on that mission, we were flying wing, and the lead of our squadron decided they had to leave because they were hit pretty bad. Well, normally tail end Charlie, they take aim at the head, it hit the tail. But this time, I don't know who they took aim at, but it seemed like we caught all that flak that there was. And when I was on the bomb site, I mean, it sounded like a real heavy rain or hail on the side of that airplane. And while I'm doing something, I can't be bothered with being afraid or anything like that. For some reason, while I'm active doing something. But while I was on the site, it didn't bother me, although I know we were being hit. And when we got through the target area, I checked for people, injuries and so forth. Not one of us was injured. Not one of us had a problem with just that. And as it was, the navigator and I decided, hey, we're shot up pretty bad. We have two engines that won't make it, and both on the same side. And we were flying right wing down, and I don't know why he couldn't get us back onto level flight. But we suggested, let's go to Switzerland. We're going to have to bail out anyway. Let's bail out over the, what's that lake over there? Geneva.
Lake Geneva?
Yeah. And no, he says, I think, our pilot says, I think I can get us home. Now he was a fairly new pilot to us, because we had gotten our pilot grounded, and he later became a P-36 pilot, got all his missions and so forth. But we said, okay, you're the captain, you know. So we got over the Alps, and the first thing he did, and I thought, oh, that's a mistake, was take us down to 10,000 feet. I was always taught, maintain your altitude as long as you can.
Sure.
And maybe you can get to where you want to go. But anyway, we kept losing altitude. Finally, he says, you know, we're going to have to bail out. And then, even then, he didn't give the order until it must have been just a couple, at most, maybe 1,500 feet. And we were all set for the word bailout. And about the time that he would have given that order, the ship right wing went down, and we went into a sharp turn. Well, I was standing in the bomb bay, and it threw me out. And when I got into the water, the plane was already down. And it looked like I might land right on top of it. And so, anyway, that particular mission really told me what we were in for. We were in the water about 3 hours, and I had made plans to, a dinghy had popped out of the airplane. And it was a little two-man outfit. And I decided, okay, we'll try to paddle to Yugoslavia and pick up, at that time, Mihailovich, I think, was the good man, the good guy to meet up with over there. And this one fellow that was taking the place of one of our crew that couldn't make it that day, I don't know if he lost the paddles or just what, but the supplies, and there was also a hole kicked in the bottom of the raft. And he said, well, how are we going to do that? And I said, well, I'll lay on one of the pontoons or whatever they call the sides, and you on the other. I'll paddle with my right hand, you'll paddle with your left hand. Until we get tired, we'll change sides. And then we'll let one of the other guys, both of them were kind of in shock. The one decided, well, he couldn't inflate his Mae West. And the reason why he couldn't inflate his Mae West, we always hooked the lanyard over the bottle, and so that we wouldn't get it caught in the airplane. we when I got over to him, I unhooked that lanyard. And he says, "How did you do that?" I said, "Remember what we did in the airplane." And he says, "My God," he says, "I could have died and drowned here." And I said, "Yes, it could have happened." So, "You okay now?" "Yeah." But the reason why I went to his bottles first was when I was down under the water on that second dive to help save Adams. I went to inflate my Midwest, and I couldn't. And I never came so close to panic in all my life. And it when I was able to retain some presence of mind anyway, I pulled that lanyard, and it shot me up pretty fast. And the best gulp of air I think I have ever.
I would imagine that was pretty sweet.
So, anyway, there was one B-24 that circled us for quite a while, and they dropped the big rafts, inflatable rafts, and every one of them just went right down. They didn't open. And so we didn't have the benefit of a lot better raft. Then, as we started to paddle, we weren't in the same coordinates as we were when the report was made. So it must have moved some.
Sure.
And in a little while, well, I guess in about 3 hours, we heard some fighters, and here came that PBY. Best airplane.
Welcome.
It was. And I just couldn't believe that he was going to land, because he had 6-foot swells on that water, and it was choppy. And but he landed, big spray of water, and then they made us take off all our clothes, throw them in a drink, and because they didn't want that extra weight on there.
Sure.
And we arrived back on base with a blanket.
But you're back on base now.
But we're back on base. They picked us up. The fighters left after they got us on board. And we got back at 6 o'clock in the evening. And they wanted us to go to the hospital. We said, "No, we're okay. Let's get us back to the base." And we got back there. For some reason or another, the officer's mess was closed, And I said, "Well, I'm not giving you a rundown of what happened until I get something to eat. I haven't eaten since 2:30 in the morning." And so I went over to the enlisted quarters, and they fed me real good. I came back, and the guys weren't too interested in my story there, because I snubbed them. And I don't know if they could have taken time or not, but talk about clicks.
Sure.
It was one thing that I couldn't quite appreciate. So anyway, we got back to the base, and I got to go to the Isle of Capri. And after the Isle of Capri, I got to flying again almost immediately after I got back. And then on July 17th, I guess I had about 4 more missions in there, that I was shot down in southern France. We were bombing a bridge over the Rhone River. And our top turret gunner, well, there was one burst of flak that hit us. And it was between the inboard engine and the fuselage. The pilot had a cut across his hand where he had his hand on the throttle. And the top turret was blown completely off. So he must have caught the full of that particular shell. And pilot, we all agreed, okay, let's try to get back to at least to Corsica. And we probably have to bail out there. And when we started losing altitude too fast, he turned around and went back and says, we've got to bail out as soon as we hit the...
Now, had you lost any engines at that point?
We had lost the inboard one right away, but shortly thereafter we lost the outboard one on that side. And so they were both feathered. And when we said we were going to bail out as soon as we hit the shore, the co-pilot, John Zimmerman, decided he wasn't going to bail out. The guy might be still alive. Well, no way could he be alive. And I told him, I said, no, I said, he can't be. I said, we've got to leave him. And he says, well, I'm not going to do it. And so the pilot told him, he said, okay, you're the commander of the ship. You do what you want with it. We're leaving. Well, I have that picture.
Yeah.
Of what happened to it. He landed in Castries, which was about 80 miles, or 80 kilometers, whatever, from where we had bailed out. And so he didn't have that much gas left either. And then he was taken prisoner. And the natives hid him for a while until a collaborator told what happened to him. And they buried the top turret gunner. And later, quite a few years later, when they found out where he was buried from home, they exhumed the body and took it back. But it was pretty rough, that mission, to just lose that guy. And then, of course, I was a prisoner of war for 9 months. I had been, I think, the closest when I know that I had a close death was when the first flap hit, my oxygen mask, the hose coming out the bottom, was cut completely in two. And then the next time I used the navigators, he wasn't with us on that flight. And I used his oxygen mask.
Harold, would you give us a little bit of information about the actual bailing out of the aircraft, what you were thinking maybe at the time, what happened on the way down, and then what happened when you actually hit the ground, and from there became a prisoner of war?
Well, we had one fellow that absolutely was horrified by bailing out. He shook all over. And I finally convinced him to kneel down in the front of this hatch in the waist of the airplane. And I pushed him out. And he just sat there kind of in the air. Well, he did have one hand on it. And I said, oh my gosh, I killed a guy. And I wasn't very happy about that. Then all of a sudden the chute opened up. I said, hey, I'm going out the same way. You know, the chute went out this way. And so anyway, after we landed, now they shot at me. And when I reached up, when I knew that they were shooting at me in the chute, I reached up and I got my one finger, my ring finger was nicked. Mm-hmm. And drew very little blood. And when I landed, I was able, well, I broke my ankle at that time. And I pulled myself over into a bunch of bushes and so forth that was on the beach. And I was able to reset my ankle, my foot rather, as good as I could, you know. Sure. And then I fashioned a splint out of what was available there and took my the bandage from the package that came with the chute, and had a fair splint. And after a while, here comes this cry, Lieutenant Wanamaker! Lieutenant Wanamaker, where are you? So I said, well, you shut up. Here I was trying to hide out, and he walked over to me, and anyway, he said, hey, that was great. He said, once I got out, I wasn't afraid anymore. And he said, absolutely crazy. And he said, that was great. He said, I'd do it again. You know. When the Germans, they were out their offense maybe about 500 feet or so from where we were, and they took one shot at us to let us know that they meant business. And so I started to walk out, you know, and I leaned on this other guy, and they wouldn't let me do it. So it made it kind of bad. And when I got out, they said, they pointed to a sign, Achtung, Minenfeld. Here, but they were all
minefield,
all heavy mines, you know,
for tanks
and so forth on landing. But we he put the gun on us and said, "Go, you know, keep going." And an officer, a German officer, came, and boy, he gave that guy hell for making me walk. And he, until a wagon came up, he made this guy carry me. So anyway, I spent the night behind a pot-bellied stove in their guard shack, and it was a miserable night. And next day, they put me up into the most fabulous room on the beach. On a villa that was their headquarters, tiled floors, a good bed, sheets, covers, glass of water on the stand, just everything. And my first guards were a fellow, and the only guy that I recorded the name was Gerard Bogle, and I wrote to him for a while after the war, until I joined Boeing. I had security clearance, and they wouldn't let me speak to the enemy. And anyway, Gerard was a young fella that had been in the Hitler Youth, but he was bad for the Hitler Youth. He didn't want any of it. And so he got on as a navigator on one of their bombers. Well, he was able to bail out after they had hit France, after France was taken.
Sure.
And he broke his leg. So they made him a guard down here on Maine. And the other guy that took his 8-hour shift was a Polish fella. He was made to fight when the Germans took Poland. They made these young guys take arms, or they threatened to kill their parents. And then the other guy was a real dark fellow from up in the Baltic Sea, and he was the most unusual. He came to me one day and he says, "Harold," he says, "if I helped you escape, would you speak for me?" I said, "Gee, you know, well, do whatever you can do." He said, "Okay." He said, "I can get a uniform, and I have a motorcycle, and he says, I got good maps." And so then from that day on, and that was almost immediately after I'd gotten there, from that day on, he'd bring some kind of a weapon up, and he'd show me how to use it and so forth. And one day, there was a knock on the door when he was there, and so all we did was put the blanket over top of that weapon. And this doctor, he was a Hauptmann, a captain, I guess.
Hauptmann,
And he pulled up a chair alongside the bed there, and for 2 hours, he told me about this lousy war. And he
that was taking a big chance.
Yeah, I'll tell you. Anyway, he was mad about the whole thing. He said he had this friend in California, in Los Angeles, who was a doctor over there. And he said, I showed him how we handled the various clinics in this country. And he said, and I was supposed to go back there, and he was going to have me tour U.S. with him. And of course, he said the war called all that off, and he said, "Here I am in this miserable place, and have to see all this stuff I don't want to see. I want to keep people alive. I don't want to kill them, you know." And anyway, he was one of the neat guys, the good guys.
That's good.
And then Gerard, when he'd come up to the room, he would bring a game and maybe a champagne bottle with champagne in it, of course, or wine. And we'd sit and play the game. And I hadn't learned chess at that time, and he taught me about what all the pieces would do, you know, and so forth. And then
you told me earlier about this interrogation that you had to undergo. Would you kind of relate that again?
Yeah, I wanted to try to stay there, but I don't know if they had some idea about if there was going to be an invasion in southern France in August, and because they moved me out real quick. And one of the places I went to first, where a doctor looked at my finger, and it had started to become infected, and he lacerated it, put some stuff on it, put a bandage on it, and he said, you know, have him take a look at it after you get where you're going. And while we were there, this was a home. Our ace, Gabreski, I guess he had about 27.
Francis Gabreski, yes.
Francis Gabreski. He had about 27 kills to his credit. Anyway, he came in, I met him, and he didn't associate much with anybody except the German officers. And at night, Gabreski, a German officer, pretty high ranking, would come in and they'd take off somewhere, and Gabreski would come back staggering usually. And then about the second or third night, where was Gabreski? And the only thing that we could find out at that time was that he was traded for a German ace. Now, the story on Gabreski, when you look at the computer, it isn't anywhere near that. It's nothing near that. Anyway, whether it's true or not, I don't know, because I haven't.
Sure.
What do you have but that story on the computer? Anyway, he was the only guy that I had met that was an ace at that time. And then after the war, I met this Jabbar, Joe Jabbar from Wichita. And I didn't think much of him. When he made lieutenant colonel from major, I mean, he gave that young lieutenant all kinds of hell because he didn't recognize him as a lieutenant colonel. Anyway, the time that we spent there was just long enough to, for this young English guy to interrogate me. Well, they did put me in solitary confinement for 3 days. Applied the heat to the room, a little room with about this big a bed with nothing on it, and food under the door. Anyway, when he had me in, I asked him, you know, how come you're a British guy, an English fella, are with the Germans? And of course, like I told you, he said, well, I'm supposed to be asking the questions. And I said, oh, you can tell me. And he said, well, he says, Hitler had this deal for all the Aryan youth around the world that he'd give good jobs to. And of course, England didn't have work, America didn't have work, and so forth, except the war effort. And so I went over, and here's what I'm doing. They put me in a uniform right away. And that happened to a couple guys that I met, one from Chicago, not Chicago, Ohio, that I was sitting on the steps in one of these rehabilitation places, and talking with a guy, and he looked at this guard that came in. He says, I know that guy. What the hell is he doing in that German uniform? And he yelled at him. And over this guy, real quick, a hurt came on. He took us inside. And this guy said, you're just really lit into him, you know, for having a German uniform on. Sure. And he says, I couldn't help it. He says, my dad thought this was a good deal to come over, and Hitler wanted us all over there and to give us good jobs, you know, when we didn't have any. And here he had lived next door to this guy for years. So anyway, there were incidences like that. But
now, you mentioned before that you spoke a little German,
yes,
and that kind of helped in your experience a little bit?
I think it helped quite a bit. I could understand more than I could speak, I think. And when this one officer made some just threatening about talking and all, and telling what I knew. Told him this is single lieutenant, don't know anything over there. And so anyway, I had to get off in Paris, and he stayed on the train. From there, after I had this, I had this laceration taken to my finger, I was sent to it was a German hospital, but there was a British doctor, a major, that had given himself up just to do that. And so this little town of Obermesfeld was, he had full run of the town, you know. He could help people in town too.
Sure.
And so about 9 o'clock, I was so miserable. And I asked him if he would take a look at my finger. And I told him I had this red streak all up my arm. And I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. And he said, "Can you walk?" Well, he came over, but when I took that bandage off, that finger was rotted. The whole upper surface here was completely in shreds. I could see the bone in there, and it smelled. And when he came over, took a look at it, he says, "Can you walk?" I says, "Yeah." The fellow in the bunk next to me said, "You want to watch that guy?" He said, "He started with my toe." He was just kidding, of course. Here he is up to just below my knee. He had amputated him up below the knee. But anyway, I went down with him. He laid me on a hard table there and put a rubber sheet on me, and then had my hand up here. Gave me sodium pentothal. Best stuff I ever had. Anytime I want to be put out, I'll try sodium pentothal. But anyway, he gave me that shot, and bingo, I was out. Well, the first thing, and I don't know, he didn't have any help there that I know, unless he had another prisoner help get me out. But I was in the bunk, and I had slept right through 7 o'clock in the morning. I got up and I was ready to go. I thought, man, you know, just a miracle overnight. This happened. But he told me that if I hadn't told him, he said, you wouldn't have survived the morning.
Really? That close?
You wouldn't have survived the morning. And so I never did get his name, and I regretted that ever since, because he was doing a job. And I commented to him about it. I said, boy, I says, you perform miracles there when you do that. And he says, well, he says, let me tell you, he says, I believe that I really could save practically everyone that would come into this hospital, no matter how badly they're injured, if they had a faith in and a will to live, a faith in my ability to do the job, and a faith in some higher being. And he said, if they had those 3 things, he says, I believe I could have saved. And I believe that because he he was getting a guy that had both legs off all the way up, one arm off all the way up. And when he came over to this rehabilitation center that they had there set up, I carried him to exercise classes.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, what are you going to, this is without legs, you're going to tell me that you can take the exercise? He said, I can still feel my legs.
Yeah.
He says, it's crazy. He says, I can exercise right there with you. And he says, even though there's nothing moving there, he said, it feels like it's moving.
Sure.
So anyway, from the rest camp, when we were in Meiningen,
Mm-hmm.
they had a little turnaround for the train.
Mm-hmm.
The train would come in. They had they would run the engine up on this turntable,
Mm-hmm.
and put it on another track and take it down to the end of and pull the train out the rest of the way. You know, it was a one-way track. Well, two P-47s with 1,000-pound bomb on each one came down, and when you can hear that, you know, as it comes down through the air, it's pretty close. Anyway, they bombed this little railway station,
Mm-hmm.
and they got the round table, you know, and so they dismantled that for a while. The Germans are real quick at redoing things.
Repairing things, sure.
But anyway, I was, at the time that happened, I was peeling potatoes with a major who had been taken prisoner too. So when that hit, he was down on the floor, and he had his knife stuck in it. I don't know if he was trying to dig a foxhole or what he was trying to do, but I'll tell you, that's frightening to have something that
Sure.
close. Then, of course, I did from out there after we were pretty much. I could walk with a crutch, I put a cast on and so forth. And I guess in Leipzig, when we were out on the platform, I was behind the other guys in the guard with the rifle, and some old fella, and I'd never experienced that in all the other times when we had an opportunity to be out where the Germans were. I never had an old guy that didn't give me the.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing
and that
was,
stands for?
This guy came over, and I mean, he was ready. Well, I took my crutch, and he wasn't going to get that close to me. And so...
the upraised
anyway,
middle finger, in other words, yeah.
The guard up there told him, yelled at him. Mm-hmm. In front of us. So he backed away. And then we got into the main camp at Saigon. And
now, you were in the British side of the camp
we were,
where the Great Escape took place.
The north compound. Mm-hmm. They had a number of different ones. We had some talented people mm-hmm. in that camp. Now, Ed Kemmerer, he played, after he came back to the United States, he was on, acted as a lieutenant or something, on As the World Turns. Mm-hmm. It was a serial type program yeah. for the women mainly. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, but he set up on a Saturday, someone made him a jukebox. Mm-hmm. and he played records
Mm-hmm.
on Saturday. And of course, he did this in high school.
Yeah.
He worked at the station, and so he had the opportunity of some good training over there.
Mm-hmm.
We did the Messiah at one time.
Handel's Messiah.
Handel's Messiah.
Mm-hmm.
And invited German officers to that. And I had never seen a German officer cry.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know what that guy got out of us, but it even sounded good to us. And we didn't have the women's voices,
Mm-hmm.
but we made out. And I've appreciated that ever since.
I could imagine.
Handel's Messiah.
In general, how was the relationship between you and your fellow prisoners and the German guards and the officers?
As far as, well, we in our room, there were 12 people in the room,
Mm-hmm.
and the room isn't very big. The bunks, they had taken, when they discovered that they used the boards bunk,
To reinforce the tunnels.
To reinforce the tunnels. They allowed us only seven of these little boards. And that straw mattress wasn't much help. But we were 12 to the room. There was 4 Americans, 4 British, and 4 Canadians.
Canadians. Mm-hmm.
That were in that room. And I tried to get in contact with one from Vancouver, but for some reason or another, I never could make contact with him.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think that some of the things they put on plays, I never did get in any of the plays, but I did a lot of reading. I studied diamonds. They had some good books over
I
there.
bet you were hungry a great deal of the time now, weren't you?
We were hungry all the time.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, we were hungry all the time. And it was we were amazed at what you could do with what little you had.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some of the things that you really remember are the rutabagas that have about a half a rotted area on them, so you took a piece out and ate around the rotted area. And the barley soup, it has these little funny white long things that you don't twist anymore. And we found out that they were barley worms, and we tossed them out. After a while, we just pushed them down.
Yeah.
After a while, you didn't even push them down. We found that they really didn't hurt us. And
As the war was in Europe was winding down, did you begin to feel like the end was near and that you were going to be released soon?
That different things happened at different times.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, it won't be long now.
Yeah.
But it was.
It wasn't
didn't
over.
happen. Hitler's life wasn't taken,
Yeah.
And poor Rommel had to commit suicide.
Mm-hmm.
And so there were things like that you hoped would happen, whatever it was going to. But we just had to bear with it,
Were you able to get much news about what was happening in the war?
We got all good news. Not necessarily, but true news.
Right.
From the British broadcasting through our own communication system.
Clandestine radio. Yeah.
There was a two-man tunnel where the guys could stand up. That was built close to where the German armory was. And it would take just a few hours digging before we could get out and maybe get that armory and the supplies. The theater that the guys built out of crates and so forth, wooden crates, they had kind of a jigsaw puzzle where you moved this and that, and maybe something else over here, you know, and until you got to where the tunnel was, where you got down into the tunnel. But not many people knew about that. And then toward the end of when things got pretty rough, Hitler had threatened to shoot everybody, the British. And so we prepared by digging trenches. I guess that must have looked funny, you know, for...
Well, one of the things that I have read about the camp organization was that it was, you retained your military organization.
Yes.
You had people that were in charge of your barracks and people that were in charge of the areas of the compound, and you had escape committees and...
Yes, had it all. I know when I got there, I had these maps. I was never searched once to see if I had a weapon or anything, and I don't know why that was, but I just never had that opportunity. I didn't do it. I don't have anything, you know. But anyway, I had a number of rubber maps on me, and I turned those over to the escape committee when I got there. And there wasn't much. We had when they put us out on the march in the middle of winter, February. It was a miserable morning. They woke us up about 2 o'clock in the morning. It was snowing. There was snow on the ground that deep, and we were going to walk to Munich.
Or a long walk.
Or you know, where we ended up was Moosburg. And as it was, I only made the first 15 kilometers, and my foot started swelling pretty bad. And I made the mistake of taking off my shoe. Then I couldn't put it back on. So I fashioned a boot out of straw. And they stopped at one of the barns. And as far as I was concerned, that was a better shoe than my shoe was, because my shoe kept my foot cold. The straw, my foot was warm. And I got to ride in a wagon for, I don't know how many miles that was, to the railroad station at Selingsrud or something. On one, we tried to get the guard. There were 19 of us in the wagon, and there was a Frenchman. It belonged to a Frenchman that they just, you know, took. And so we tried to get that German to ride with us rather than walk. back behind. He was an old guy, you know. And so, okay, well, before we got down the road, then we come into this town, and we went up to the head office of the town.
The Burgermeister.
And the Burgermeister. And, they didn't want anything to do with us keep going, you know. And so we went on, and our guard was gone.
Mm-hmm.
Now we could have gone anywhere. Anyway, we circled around, looking for a place to stay. Then it became dark, and, and here we have second time. And that Burgermeister felt like, I guess maybe I'd better get rid of him, try to find a place for him.
Yeah.
And they did in a big old barn. But in one of those barns, the husband of my wife's best friend, he was a P-51 pilot, and he flew too low to the ground one time, and didn't pay too much attention as he was strafing, and he hit the ground, you know. And anyway, he went and skidded. Fortunately, just had glass wounds. But he was in this one big barn. And every place where we stopped, I asked if they knew a Howard Linder. And yeah, he's right back there, you know. And that was the first time when I met the husband of my wife's the best friend. And anyway, he later he died. And all of these guys became lieutenant colonels. And if he didn't stay in that 23 years, you know, it was a mistake.
Sure.
You had to stay in that.
Could you tell us about the day that you finally were liberated?
There was quite a pitched battle. You could hear it getting closer. And we understood that it was Patton's 14th Armored Division that was doing the work. And at one place where the Germans decided to take a stand, instead of being on the protective side of the wall, they were in the front of that wall, exposing themselves to the fire from these guys. We could never figure that one out. But anyway, we kind of kept low because bullets were flying. You knew they were. And one guy in camp was hit by one of the bullets that strayed a little far. And this big tank finally got up there and went just right through the gate. And there was a young German, he could have been German, but a young soldier, American soldier on top of that tank. And he was playing music on his boombox. And the first song that I heard as that tank rolled through the gate was "Don't Fence Me In." And what a coincidence.
Yeah.
Just that happened at that time. Well, years later I thought I'd try to make a little money off of Reader's Digest, and he probably didn't think much of it. Probably wondered where I got the story. Anyway.
So that was finally over at that point.
But yeah, it was pretty much over for. We went out, just went out in the streets and so forth. and mainly to scrounge for food. We had found some food off of some of the GIs that were doing the fighting, but they couldn't supply that much.
No.
Anyway, we decided to see what we could do about fishing, and we bummed some, I don't know if just what they were, but they were little bombs, like grenades or something. And we were going to fish the river with those. So about 5, 6 of us, few guys went across the river, and the water was about waist deep, pretty cold, but we didn't mind if we could get some fish. And they dropped these grenades or whatever they were into the water upstream from us, and fish floated, and we picked them up, tossed them up on the bank.
It really was catching rather than fishing.
And that made quite a meal. In fact, we did cook some of them right there on the shore where we could find the wood.
Well, at what point did you finally get back to control of the United States?
After, I think what they wanted to do was kind of fatten us up a little bit. So from there they took us up to Nuremberg by truck from Moosburg. And even there, an accident occurred where a guy had his leg. He was sitting over the edge of the truck, and a truck in the back of him couldn't stop one time, and this guy lost his leg after all that. And then they took us up to the field at Nuremberg, and no shelter, no nothing. We were up there 3 days, and we were using the old bomb critters for latrines and places to do what we needed to do. And so this one fellow and I, we found out that there was a Messerschmitt jet airplane up in one of the hangars up there. We had a little ways to walk. Well, in the meantime, here comes a Stuka dive bomber, low over the field. And boy, 50 caliber machine guns were firing at that guy, and the guy landed. And but in the meantime, when all that was happening, we just made a dive for one of these foxhole or bomb critters. Luckily, it was never used.
Okay.
but anyway, it was a young guy, got out of that airplane, just a shaking, you know, and somebody gave him a cigarette. He appreciated that, you know.
Sure.
And he had found that Stuka with enough gasoline, and I guess he had a few hours in it. And he knew how to fly it. Boy, he was going to get out of there.
Yeah.
He wanted no more of the war. And so they searched his baggage and so forth for weapons, and took his weapons and sent him on his way.
Now, you were still there in Germany still, at the end of the war? The war in Germany?
We were, no, the war was over. Let's see, that was, April 29th, what was it, May 7th?
May 7th was VE Day.
Yeah. And so, anyway, we were there for, I'm not sure what the dates were, but from there, they sent us to Reims. We got an airplane. And
In
to
France.
Reims, France. And there we got deloused and got fed something. And then from there we went up to, I think it was Le Havre, France.
Le Havre.
And right close to Le Havre, they had these rehabilitation camps. Camp Lucky Strike, Camp Chesterfield,
Right.
Camp Camel. Don't you smoke? Anyway, I met a cousin of mine up there, and I was walking across the field one day and met some other guys that I had known, and made some good friends there, and from there then, well, we didn't get away until June to be able to board a ship and come home.
I imagine that was a wonderful feeling when you finally did get off of that ship.
Yeah, and you know, today, unless there's a big celebration, no way will they let that ship land without that celebration. Nobody knew that we would come in, I guess, and there were all those prisoners. Well, they took us to Fort Dix, New York.
New Jersey?
New Jersey, yeah, New Jersey. And that's where we really got a meal.
Finally.
I mean, that was something. The best steak, you know, and everything else. And then we weren't there that long. We got our orders to, well, I accumulated quite a bit of leave. In fact, I had never had a 30-day as an enlisted man when I was in Panama for 3 years. And so I never had hardly any kind of vacation when we were actually fighting the war. And so I had accumulated that time, and so they said, come back to Atlantic City in October. And they gave me the date, and then there's where we were processed out. But I was standing in the line, and I felt a hand on my shoulder. Lieutenant Wanamaker, I'm so glad to see you. I turned around, and here was this Lieutenant Colonel, who was the major at that time.
Not your friend.
My friend, I told him, he said, you still want, you're going to stay in the service? I said, I wouldn't stay in your damn Air Force for nothing or money, you know. And oh no, he says, I said, after you did that to me, and he said, oh, he says, let's let bygones be bygones. I said, well, you might be able to, but not me.
Of course, you did stay in the Air Force Reserve.
And you know, when I had refused, when I had refused to come back, I thought, oh boy, here's his chance to really court-martial me for not obeying a direct order from a superior officer. But I'm afraid he knew what would happen there because of that lieutenant, our colonel, Sneed.
Sure. And you did remain in the reserves, and you retired as a major.
Yeah. But my wife says, why didn't you go up to one of those politicians and tell them your story? And heck, he said, look what McCain did for the Marines. Everyone. Now, I had time and grade as a second lieutenant for first lieutenant. And that should have been enough.
Yes.
I said, here was all those guys got their promotions, but only because of McCain and what he did for them. And that was all the people that were prisoners of war.
Well, Harold, I want to thank you for talking to us today. I want to thank you for your many years of service to our country and for just being you. I really enjoyed talking to you and hearing some of your stories. Thank you again.
There are a few.